one of my favorite things about Bitcoin and talking to people about Bitcoin is hearing like real life stories. I don't know if you noticed, but it's kind of like a theme through these different episodes that have kind of stuck out to me, are like stories of how people are using it in real life to be able to overcome adversarial situations. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bitfinex Talks. I'm your host, Ricardo Martínez. Today, I'm joined with Javier Bastardo, my coworker here at Bitfinex. He's on the marketing team with me. This interview is going to be a little bit different. We're celebrating our 100th episode, and Javier's actually going to be interviewing me. So, Javier, how are you? Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if do you feel weird or is it normal to be the guest of a podcast? You know, like always the host, but
I think it feels very weird, to be honest, because normally I interview people. I've only done like in my personal life, like 2 podcasts where I've been the guest. So this is like my 3rd one. So yeah, it's a little bit different.
yeah. I guess, and I've been following the episodes, and we have plenty of great conversations with you. I think that you do a really interesting host job, because normally people just keep like scripted or more formal format, but you make it more real, let's say. So it's really great to be Ricardo today. It's more than 100 episodes now, and I guess that you have a lot of experience, and I would like to start with that. Like, when you first started hosting the Bitfinex Talk, what was the original vision, and what are your thoughts about that perspective now, 100 episodes after?
Well, when I first came on board, I was doing Bit Refill's podcast prior to joining Bitfinex. So I did, I think, like 57 episodes for Bit Refill with To the Moon, which was their podcast that I was a co-host. I had 2 other co-hosts, Jerry and Lawrence, who were part of the Bit Refill team. So I had been doing some podcasts like prior to coming on board to Bitfinex, but when I came on board to Bitfinex, they didn't have like any sort of podcast or like educational content. And one of the visions that Sheil and I both kind of agreed upon was that we wanted to have interesting content like focused on the industry. Bitfinex being like the oldest still existing Bitcoin exchange that has survived like multiple bear markets, the hack and many other crazy events that have happened in crypto, black swan events, price crashes, runs on Tether, like these kind of things. Like Bitfinex has proven itself to be extremely resilient. So we both felt that like Bitfinex offering educational content would be extremely important for the industry, because we have like a plethora of experience and we've weathered many storms.
Yeah, and with this in mind, what would you say that was like, let's say, the 5 most remarkable episodes so far, like with this perspective of building it from the scratch? And obviously, I guess that even with the experience, the first one were in a way, and then you improve it. And what would you say that were the most remarkable ones?
Well, I'm not going to go like in any sort of chronological order, but off the top of my head, I would say the anniversary interview that I did with Paolo Arduino, our CTO, was amazing, because we were celebrating Bitfinex's 12-year anniversary. And in crypto, 12 years seems like a lifetime, right? Like 6 months in crypto feels like 10 years. So like 12 years feels like a century. And to be able to sit down with Paolo and kind of pick his brain about his motivations, like from starting Bitfinex, and then just the trials and tribulations that Bitfinex has gone through under his leadership, and like how his vision has evolved over the years. Like how when Bitfinex started, they were pretty much like a Bitcoin only exchange, and then they started adding the first altcoins, which were things like Litecoin and other coins that came out, like I don't know, around 2013, 2014, like the first wave of altcoins before the ICO madness. And then to see like Bitfinex's role kind of change within the industry and, you know, like evolve to focus more on institutional players and like whales and like huge liquidity. That evolution of Bitfinex's vision, to hear it from Paolo's own like words, was very, very important to me. Like I felt lucky to be the guy to sit down with him and have that conversation for the anniversary episode.
I had the opportunity to work at Bitfinex. I was tasked with a very, for a specific job. So I joined as a senior software engineer consultant to help Bitfinex scaling the matching engine. When I arrived in Bitfinex, the matching engine was very limited. Let's say it was very slow. Would only cope with, 10, 50 orders per second. And Bitfinex was getting popular. Bitcoin was getting popular, and Bitfinex was getting popular. So 10, 50 orders per second was not enough. Just to give you 10 years after today, Bitfinex matching engine can scale to millions of orders per second, where that is the scale we can get to. We have hundreds of different pairs. In 2014, we had just Bitcoin, USD, and the Litecoin, I think. So I was tasked with that to help the growth of the matching engine specifically. I didn't take care of the rest of the platform at that time.
Another one that I feel like was really, really a significant interview was my interview with Rachel Rose O'Leary. She's from the AssangeDAO. And Julian Assange's story is like heavily intertwined with Bitcoin. Like some would say that like without WikiLeaks and Assange, like Bitcoin never would have become like a mainstream phenomenon or a successful cryptocurrency. When Bitcoin was in its infancy and WikiLeaks was being deplatformed for reporting controversial stories that the powers that be did not want published, PayPal and many other payments platforms that WikiLeaks was using to accept their donations were deplatforming WikiLeaks as an organization. They were cutting them off. They were not letting them get financing. They were trying to starve them financially for going against the grain. And the importance of WikiLeaks deciding to accept Bitcoin kind of put Bitcoin on the world stage. It made people that hadn't been paying attention to cryptocurrencies, that just thought it was like a computer nerd thing, say, hey, wait a second, like what's going on here? They're doing what? And that kind of brought a lot of attention to Bitcoin. And I think that contributed like a lot to like the first real bull run where it went up to like $1,200 in 2014. And that kind of lit the fire for the rest of the Bitcoin explosion onto the scene. So that was super important. And then the AssangeDAO itself did something that no other crypto project has ever done, which is unite people from all over the world that all wanted to see Julian Assange be freed, with a common goal and a common effort. And they were able to raise like $57 million or $55 million. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a significant amount of money. And they used that money to fund Julian Assange's legal battle, many events to kind of, get volunteers to help out with the cause and advocacy and these kind of things that made it possible to release him from custody after like 11 or 12 years or however long he was locked up in the embassy and then the prison in London. And they stopped his extradition to the US. Like it was very, very remarkable. Like no other crypto project has been able to have like a real world impact on the same level as the AssangeDAO. Like he was one of the most high profile political prisoners in, I would say, like the last like 50 years. Like Julian Assange is a household name. Like everybody knows him. He was a very, very high profile political prisoner. People around the world thought his case was treating him unjustly. So to see him achieve freedom after that kind of epic, legendary legal battle through using a tool like a decentralized autonomous organization, like to me, that was super, super important. Like that can't even be stated enough. That's like one of the most cypherpunk things I've ever personally been able to witness. And the fact that I was able to interview Rachel Rose O'Leary as her first interview where she was able to speak publicly about it after Assange's release, I felt like was a significant milestone.
Talking about how we could use NFTs and tokenization to help the Assange case. And then, you know, when we saw the Free Ross DAO, the success of that, a few of us had the same idea, which was basically like, let's do a Free Ross DAO for Assange. And at the time, Gabriel had kind of hinted that there was a one-of-one NFT that Assange was going to be collaborating on with this major artist. He hadn't told us who the artist was yet. So we kind of thought originally, actually, for the Assange show, we were like, what if we were to do a cypherpunk art collection, which would feature all kinds of different artworks, including some stuff from cypherpunk history, and some stuff from lunar punk, which is a kind of a word that was flying around a lot at the time. But in the end, we settled on the most kind of powerful, high impact thing, which was like, let's get a DAO together to bid on a one-of-one NFT that's made in collaboration between Assange and Pac, this digital artist. So then, you know, a few of us converged on this idea simultaneously. A few Twitter posts were put out. We all kind of jumped into a Telegram group, which was made, and started kind of working together to make the DAO happen.
Yeah, that's really nice because you can see the evolution of Bitcoin in a way there, because as you said, WikiLeaks started an important attention movement, let's say, around Bitcoin in that moment. Even Satoshi was a little scared when WikiLeaks started accepting Bitcoin. So it was really important in that moment. And then you have obviously Assange incarcerated and so on. And this decentralized autonomous organization that is using the technology or one of the parts of Bitcoin itself, but that has been in a different way, in a different evolution in a way. And like, as you said, making a real impact in an important name for the history of the technology itself, but in general for human rights fight and human rights activism is really interesting. And do you have other in mind, other remarkable episodes?
Yeah, I certainly do. But quickly, before I get onto that, the point that you made about human rights and like fighting for human rights, I feel like that's a huge part of Bitcoin. I feel like Satoshi started Bitcoin as kind of a human rights struggle to kind of like take the power back from the central banks and put people in control of their own money again. And like ultimately that's a human rights struggle because poverty and like economic problems stem from the fact that our money system is broken. So to me, like that's a core piece of like Bitcoin's cultural role and technological achievement is to be like a tool for human rights and freedom and justice. Back to your question, another episode that really stood out to me was my interview with Harry Halpin from NIM VPN. NIM is the first VPN and anonymous mixnet. And since the beginnings of the cypherpunk movement on the cypherpunk mailing list, like cryptocurrency was not the only thing the cypherpunks were working on. They were also working on anonymous credentials so that we could use public private key cryptography to have identities and reputation systems online without giving up our actual identities and personal information, which can be hacked. And I mean, we just saw the Coinbase thing happen where KYC records tied to people's real identities were pilfered by bad actors. So anonymous credentialing is a huge part of it. And then anonymous communication systems. We see Paolo, like this very day, like putting resources and energy behind things like Keat, because of this cypherpunk need for anonymous communication systems, as well as decentralized money and anonymous credentials. So for me to speak with Harry Halpin, who is a longtime cypherpunk, like he was friends with like Len Sassaman and I forget, Whitfield Diffie, I think his name is. He's another famous cryptography that did the Diffie-Hellman cryptographic algorithms. Harry has been a cypherpunk for a long, long time, like since the 90s. And he never really like went all into crypto because he shared the same view as Len Sassaman that Bitcoin's privacy needed to be improved before he would find it more interesting. They were all looking for ways to be anonymous online. So Harry focused his efforts on remailers, which Adam Back was also very, very focused on this. That's how he invented Hashcash proof of work, was because they were using the remailers to try to communicate anonymously through email, and they had a spam problem. So Adam Back basically invented Hashcash to solve that spam problem. And Harry was working on this problem as well, trying to create anonymous mixnets through email. But anonymous mixnets never really saw like mainstream adoption. There was a couple servers that they had like in the 90s, and then I forget what he said, like they exposed Scientology or something like that. Like they promoted on the remailer, they published the secrets of Scientology, and then Scientology like sued them and took the server down. So like the anonymous mixnet thing never really took off. And then also one of the problems was the technological limitations. Like the bandwidth of the internet was just too slow back then. Like when people had dial up, it was a lot harder to realize this. Now that internet speeds have caught up and they're exponentially faster, it was possible to make an anonymous mixnet for the first time. And NIM was able to do that in a decentralized way where it doesn't collect any data and it provides privacy that's superior than, you know, established privacy networks like I2P or Tor currently. So like for me to have Harry kind of explain that like history of the cypherpunk movement and why NIM decided to focus on creating the world's first like production grade, you know, mainstream anonymous mixnet, I felt like that was a huge part of cypherpunk history that was super remarkable, and that a lot of people in crypto are so focused on like the decentralized cash part of it that maybe they didn't realize that history or know that that was also a huge component, anonymous communication.
We really want to deliver something that anyone can use to really fulfill this was honestly a cypherpunk dream. Can we build an anonymous internet? And I think the answer is yes. I think this is our one chance to do it. There is a very real danger governments will shut it down, or will try to shut. They'll try to shut cryptocurrency down. They'll try to shut privacy down. They'll try to shut freedom of speech down. So we need to have these kind of decentralized anonymity networks working, up and running with thousands, if not millions of users. And at that point, the genie's out the bottle. You can't shut it down. Just as I think right now, you can't really shut Bitcoin down. They could have maybe done it a few years ago, but now they can't. It's too late. This needs the cypherpunk dream is not just digital money. The cypherpunk dream is digital money and anonymous networks. And NIM is delivering this kind of second part of the cypherpunk and crypto anarchist vision.
This is interesting, and before we go into the other episodes that you remember, I would like to ask you a little about this, because you just said it, like there are a lot of people in the industry that may don't know about this kind of topics, and if you see YouTube channels that are focused on crypto or even in Bitcoin, I would have a hard time finding some of these topics, like those are not like the main conversations like the creators or podcasters or influencers are having. But from Bitfinex perspective, it's like normal. It's like the kind of topics that we want to discuss. But I want your input there. Like, what is the vision behind the selection of the topics? I like the guests and so on. Like, do you have like the same, let's say, agenda of these named channels, or what is behind in let's say the editorial side of the podcast?
Well, I think like you being here at Bitfinex as well, like you would agree that Bitfinex primarily has a lot of Bitcoiners. Like Paolo is a hardcore Bitcoiner. You're a hardcore Bitcoiner. I'm a hardcore Bitcoiner. Matthias from Keat is a hardcore Bitcoiner. John from Synonym is a hardcore Bitcoiner. The guys trying to solve like peer-to-peer lending with peer credit are hardcore Bitcoiners. Like, I would say like everything that like Bitfinex does from a philosophical level is like from that standpoint as a hardcore Bitcoiner. So it makes sense that things like Keat and Synonym, which are trying to solve like those two issues that we just discussed, like anonymous credentialing with Synonym, where they're trying to make decentralized identities based on private keys and like a whole social graph and like social network with the BitKit wallet through that technology. And then also Keat being a serverless, like peer-to-peer encrypted messaging and video chatting app. Like those two efforts that Bitfinex is fully involved in and supporting, like that's the realization of these two other aspects of the cypherpunk movement, right? And to see like Bitfinex itself focus on the digital cash side of it and you know, digital assets and tokenization through the exchange, and then see, you know, Keat and Synonym both attacking these other goals of cypherpunk technology for true financial freedom and like personal freedom and online freedom. Like to me, that is super, super important. And I feel like everyone else kind of shares that. Like the fact that Bitfinex is even supporting those two kind of things, it kind of like proves that, right? So that's kind of like why I think like I'm allowed to have the freedom to pick guests that I want to talk to. Like I don't really like put too much thought into it. It's more just like, wow, like this person's doing something super interesting. I want to sit down and talk to him. And then I'm lucky enough that Bitfinex is well known. So then if I reach out to them as Bitfinex or an employee of Bitfinex, they're a lot more likely to accept the interview than they might be if it was just Ricardo Martínez, some guy they've never heard of that's a Bitcoiner, right? So like that's basically my focus. Like sometimes obviously we have objectives, like we'll list a project or something, and they'll want me to, you know, do a certain interview with like a certain team or individual from a project that we're working closely with or partnering with. But for the most part, I have freedom, and I just try to talk to people that I think would make for interesting interviews, like personally, that I'm curious about.
Okay, nice. So there's a lot of Ricardo's thoughts and interest in the podcast itself. So it's really nice to see that it grows so big right now. And let's go back to some remarkable episodes and conversations. And obviously, probably would make sense to add the links to those in this 100 celebration, so people can see and judge and join to the conversation. But back to the remarkable ones. Do you have another one in mind?
Yeah, I do. Another one, like I don't know, because Stefan's not very well known, but Stefan Willett from FRNT Financial, I actually ran into him in the casino in Lugano. Like after the Plan B forum one night, I went with a bunch of people from the conference to the casino, and we were hanging out there, and I started talking to Stefan Willett, and it turned out that he works very, very closely with both Bitfinex and Tether. He runs a fund in Canada. No, I think it's based in the UK. He's Canadian, but the fund itself is based in the UK. They're a financially regulated fund, and they create infrastructure for other funds to invest in digital assets. And the fact that Stefan Willett like basically pioneered this, he started very, very early. Like I want to say like 2015, 16, somewhere around there, trying to create like investment products for digital assets. So he was there from the beginning, like before institutions were here, before regulators accepted Bitcoin, when they still kind of looked at it as like a sketchy thing that they didn't know about and, you know, didn't know how to deal with it because it was like a whole new technology. He was in the trenches trying to build investment products and like white label solutions for financial institutions that were interested in getting exposure to digital assets. And one of the things that he really said that stuck out to me was kind of what we talked about earlier in the episode here, that Bitfinex has weathered many storms. Like, they've been through multiple bear markets. You know, there was the hack, as we mentioned earlier. They made all their users whole, in contrast to many other exchanges which either went out of business, rug pulled their users, or whatever. Like, Bitfinex is demonstrating integrity. And like, as a institutional player, like, those are the kind of partnerships that he is seeking out in the industry. Like, he was saying, like, if you haven't gone through like a bear market cycle, like, I don't know if I even want to work with you, because we haven't seen how resilient you are, like, when there's an actual crisis. And, you know, we've seen a lot of businesses go under, go out of business. Their business model was, you know, doing fine when the price is pumping, but, you know, when the crypto winter comes, like, does your business model hold up? Can you maintain that level of professionalism and integrity? And, you know, that kind of made me like reevaluate like the importance of Bitfinex and Tether in the industry, and the fact that like we've been like a rock, like we're very, very stable. And, you know, these other institutional players, like the reason we have whales, the reason we have institutions on the exchange is because of that stability that we provide.
You know, I consider Bitfinex and Tether two of the, you know, the core, like, to be honest, they're really the core of the ecosystem for me. Like, there was so much dissent around these two organizations over the years. And if you know the organization well, it just made no sense. Like, I saw them go through their hack in 2016. I saw them deal with the issues they had around banking. They always dealt with it in an integrous way that supported their customers' interests. And all these new fly-by-night guys that were getting, held up in the last market cycle, like SBF was the biggest example. You've never even seen how we operated in a bear market when the tide comes in. You know, I've seen the tide come in on Bitfinex and Tether many, many times, and they've always been able to withstand the storm. And in this space, that's as good as anything to be able to find strong counterparties, is track records and the way they've dealt with things when things have gone wrong. Because it's the tail risks in the space are such that it's very hard to tell what could go wrong. I mean, we're going to have issues in this bull market that me and you couldn't even, anticipate if we had 10 hours sitting here running through things. And it really haven't. In the partners you want to be working with are ones that you have seen to have a track record of giving up their own interests to support their client interests, which is what Tether and Bitfinex have done time and time again. So, I'm really proud of the team at Tether and Bitfinex, and as a Bitcoin proponent, in terms of how they've weathered the storm, how they've come out of this.
Okay, nice. It's really interesting, and even in the, let's say, the weirdest places, you would find interesting conversations in cities like Lugano or here in San Salvador, like places where Bitcoin is already a thing and that are attracting Bitcoiners. And then you have this good kind of perspective from someone that, as you say, and I would say that also, for example, Gabor Gurbax, that is part of the organization, and he was working with Vanek even before the ETFs, the Bitcoin ETFs got approval. And I mean, like, a few years ago, like, it's not something that just happened from nowhere. And it's interesting that he and also Stefan shared this idea of how important it is for a company like Bitfinex to be contrasted and like survived bear markets conditions. So it's really nice.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Gabor on this show as well, and talked to him. And yeah, he says a lot. Him and Stefan would probably be friends because they say very similar things about Bitfinex and Tether. But with Stefan, I was hanging out with him for like 2-3 hours in the casino, just talking to him about the industry and like finding out about his fund and like what they're doing. And I was like, bro, you got to come on the podcast. Like, you got to have this conversation for the viewers so they can check it out. Another episode that I would say comes to mind was DJ Valerie B. Love. Now, DJ Valerie B. Love is a pretty well-known Bitcoiner. The way I met her was in El Salvador at Plan B. And she was DJing at one of the after parties. And she was also, it was Adopting Bitcoin. Sorry, my bad. It was Adopting Bitcoin 2023. And she was DJing at one of the after parties, but she was also the host of the conference. So she was, I saw her like the whole time at the conference, like presenting the speakers, and like she just had this wonderful energy. And then I happened to run into her at an after party and she was DJing, right? And the party was very, very fun. There was a lot of people there. It was packed. And then after her set, I pulled her aside and started talking to her, and wanted to hear her story and things like that. And I was like, yo, you got to come on the Bitfinex podcast. Like, it would be amazing to interview you, especially since you just hosted this and that kind of thing. And she came on the show and like basically told me her story of how she discovered Bitcoin. Like, she was not like a Bitcoiner, like a traditional Bitcoiner. I think she was in real estate, and like she stumbled upon Bitcoin and then started learning about it, and then realized like how important sound money is, and how the money system is broken, and how fiat works with inflation and devaluation and that kind of thing. So she became like a gung-ho Bitcoiner. And then she became friends with Noor and Kamal, and they like invited her, like while she was still like a pretty new Bitcoiner, to host Adopting Bitcoin, which is like one of the most hardcore like Bitcoin maxi conferences in existence. And I thought that was super funny because she had been a Bitcoiner for like 2 years, and she was hosting an event full of like people that have been in Bitcoin since like 2010, 2011, 2014, so I was like, wow, like these people have been here for decades, and you just kind of like walked right on in here and started hosting. So that was super interesting to me. And then when she started telling me about her work with Bitcoin, like she does a podcast of Bitcoin education for like specifically geared towards women. And she was telling me like she has heard stories and like witnessed like people that she knows that she's recommended Bitcoin to use Bitcoin to get themselves out of like life-threatening situations. Like she works a lot with like people that are in like domestic violence situations and have to like flee these bad relationships where like, the guy in the relationship is like harming the woman or harming the children, controlling the finances, being obsessive, like checking the phone, like putting apps to track where they're going, like super obsessive, like horrible situation, right? So she was able to teach women in these kinds of situations to be able to acquire Bitcoin, like in a non-KYC way, and then create a savings, like an emergency fund in Bitcoin to kind of save money so that they have like a little bit to finally like escape the situation, right? Without their obsessive partner knowing. And that this has like saved multiple lives. Like she knows multiple stories of women that were able to escape like these domestic violence situations using Bitcoin as a tool for financial freedom in a very, very like restrictive and horrible situation where their finances are being controlled. They're given an allowance. They're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to have their own money. And using Bitcoin and the fact that Bitcoin goes up in price, they were able to put 20 bucks here, 50 bucks there away, squirrel it away. And that grew into a significant amount of money due to Bitcoin scarcity. And then that empowered these women to have the financial ability to seek out their own place or escape a dangerous situation and find a safe place to stay, or these kind of things. So like that to me was super, super inspiring.
If you do not have financial sovereignty to some degree as a mom, as a woman, you are at the mercy of your partner. And if you don't have things in your name, if you don't have the ability to, God forbid, something does happen like a domestic violence situation, and violence comes in many forms. It's not just clobbering you over the head. It could be psychological abuse. It could be financial manipulation and abuse. There's a huge spectrum of how this could play out. And so if you do not have something that is your own life raft as a mother, and it's to me, it's a responsibility and a duty as a mother to have that for yourself and your children, because as much as, till death do us part and everything's going to be peace, love, and granola with you and your spouse, hopefully that's the case, but it doesn't always work out that way. And so if you're not taking that next step of making sure that you've got your own getaway, you could be putting the lives of your children at risk. And, this is what was happening with this guest. And, I asked her, I was like, are you sure you're comfortable? Like, I can anonymize you. We can use a different name and do the whole thing with the screen and your voice. You can still share your story. And she was like, no, I'm ready. I can tell it. And of course, within 2 weeks, we both got the cease and desist. And now she's dealing with a whole shit show of legal stuff from this person. But the slow erosion of her privacy and her freedom, this man was putting surveillance cameras inside of the house, and he would give her $200 in cash a week. No credit cards. Her names were not in the bank statements, nothing. So she had no financial sovereignty. And she knew about Bitcoin, and she had her mom start to take little bits of that cash, have a phone outside of the house, and she had a wallet, and she started saving in Bitcoin over a year, and was getting her escape plan. And so it was just this like slow process. And so unfortunately, it ended up with a violent situation where she did have to leave immediately, and she had enough to get started with rent and getting herself and her children safe. And so that's a super powerful way that people can understand, like, wow, Bitcoin can save someone's life, and help them start again.
One of my favorite things about Bitcoin and talking to people about Bitcoin is hearing like real life stories. I don't know if you noticed, but it's kind of like a theme through these different episodes that have kind of stuck out to me, or like stories of how people are using it in real life to be able to overcome adversarial situations.
Yeah, and I think that it totally aligns with Bitcoin itself. Like, obviously, you can say that you can learn about it from a scientific perspective if you are a computer scientist or something like that related to technology. But I agree with you that the human side of of this movement, this technology is really important and is a good way to, let's say, invite people to want to learn more about Bitcoin. At the end, it's a really personal decision, and these examples, this possibility to see how it could be impactful and important in a real life and in this kind of dangerous situation that Valerie have been helping with. It's really amazing, and it's a good way to also share the ideas of Bitcoin, sound money, the importance of financial freedom. And I think that it's a really remarkable, let's say, way to orange peel people, and given a platform to those kind of voices is really important. So kudos to you too. Any final thoughts that you want to share in this celebrationary episode?
Yeah, actually, I would like you to tell people your story, because you, as I understand it, also used Bitcoin in real life to escape a precarious situation. I would like to leave the viewers with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was, my background is in philosophy. I was studying the master. I didn't complete it because the situation in Venezuela, where I came from, was really, bad in terms of the inflation and hyperinflation that we even go through. So let's say it was 2016. I was working one job in early January, but at the end of that year, I need to have 3 jobs to earn, let's say, around the same money to keep things going. And I needed a 4th job, and I landed one writing news about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, but as I said, my background was in philosophy. I didn't know anything about nothing about Bitcoin and so on. So it was really difficult in the early moments. But these guys from cryptonoticias.com, that was the outlet where I started, were really supportive in that way. So they liked my writing and the way I do research and so on. But they were patient enough to allow me to get the tools to better understand these things. And at the end, I am not a journalist, but let's say all my professional career is around journalism, writing, content creation in general. And it was a really good experience to start digging into a topic that I didn't know anything about it. And as I said, I started 2016 with one job. I ended with three. This was my fourth job in that moment. And it was coincidentally that it was at the beginning of the 2017 bull market. When I started covering this topic, Bitcoin was on their 1K, 900, 800, something. And at the end of that year, it was in 20K. So it was really impactful in terms of the price. And I had the contrast with the reality of Venezuela, that it was a nightmare, because you start to see things really, let's say, impactful, like people eating from garbage, or neighbors asking for food, even friends coming to you saying that they can afford stuff. So it was really hard in the the contrast between Bitcoin and what was happening around it, and the scarcity that it had, and then understanding how important the scarcity could be in price terms, but also in contracts with this context of hyperinflation that I was living in. And like it will sound a little cheesy, but it was like a lifeline in that moment, because as I said, everything around me was getting worse and worse, and I was lucky enough to not save, because my saving power wasn't there in that moment, but at least not having that much of troubles living in Venezuela. And at the end of that year, I could just go with one work. My only job was writing about cryptocurrency. So the start was really difficult. I lost some money because I didn't save the keys. I had problems using local Bitcoins at the beginning. I had like PayPal blockages, and also many of the dollar denominated products that you can access as a Venezuelan were blocked because of the regime. Uh, yeah, the regime is also the cause of all this, but the impact of different yeah
Like sanctions
decisions
and
of,
stuff, huh?
yeah, and companies saying that they won't attend our market. So it was really hard in that moment. But then I had Bitcoin, this thing that I just discovered, and it worked to solve all those needings, like buying dollars. So instead of buying dollars directly, you have some satoshis on your local Bitcoin account, or in that moment your Blue wallet. So yeah, it was a difficult moment in that let's say 2017, 2018, early 2018. And then I started also writing for Cointelegraph en Español, that is the Spanish version of Cointelegraph. And I was doing like with both outlets, but there was a problem. I was too opinionated on X. It was Twitter in that moment, but people started saying that, why these outlets, why they have this guy that talks that bad about blockchain and Ethereum, because as Ricardo said early in the podcast, I'm a hardcore Bitcoiner. I'm not that fighting these days, but in that moment, yes. So obviously, it was a kind of a problem. It never came from the outlets itself. They were really happy, and in Cointelegraph, I was a opinion writer. So yes, I needed to be opinionated, but then I saw an opportunity to do something different, and I launched my own project. In that moment, it was a Bitcoin only community. It's like among the, not the first, because the first one was Bitcoin Venezuela, that is like really old, but in 2019 it was, I would say, that the only one that was Bitcoin only, trying to, as we discussed, show with a life history how important Bitcoin could be. But the life history is the one that I just described, that everybody was living through the same situation, so they can understand faster the idea of a scarcity. Like you can say, you see the bills in the street, and people understand that they actually see the bills in the street, and the bolivar doesn't hold its value. So they were things that I thought that would be interesting for people to know about Bitcoin. And I don't know if you recall, but in those years, as I say, 2017, 2018, 2019, Venezuela was really popular among crypto because of the inflation, and people say, yeah, this is the solution, and so on. I thought that that's the right narrative. So I started this community to share with people this information about Bitcoin. But I'm from Caracas. I wanted to go to other cities around because Caracas is the capital. I wanted to see if it makes sense around, and it wasn't like that. So it was really hard to see that even it could be impactful for me. People have like more appealing necessities in the in a daily basis, like even to eat. So it's hard to think about something abstract like Bitcoin and so on. So it was a reality check to me that obviously I want to help everybody, and that everybody could survive what the regime is making to Venezuela, and that I think that Bitcoin is a good tool for the people. But that made me understand that maybe it's not for everyone in the country. Like you need to have solved some stuff before, and then I change a little the project, and then also we have the COVID thing. So I can go around the country doing the meetups that we were doing. We did like 13 meetups around different places in the country, but this is the outcome that I have. And then the COVID, and it turned to be at the end a podcast, but we started doing like Zoom calls or Jitsi calls for people to join and speak a little and have the same experience that you have in a meetup, but in a digital way. This is normal now, but in the middle of the COVID thing, it wasn't that normal. So it was interesting for people, and I started to invite people to talk with us. Like, for example, Francisco Calderon, that is a Venezuelan developer that works in Bitcoin and Lightning. So people started to say, why don't you keep this conversation? We want to see them because I can join in the live stream. So what can be done? So I started a podcast, Hablemos de Bitcoin. It could be translated, Let's Talk Bitcoin. And there I had really good people, like Andreas Antonopoulos was among the very first interviews that I did. My English is not good now, but in that moment it was really, really, really bad. And he was patient enough to understand that, but also share really great knowledge about Bitcoin. And then we start to see that connecting those high-level profiles with the people that may be interested in Bitcoin in Venezuela was a better way to support, let's say, the mission of Bitcoin, the message of Bitcoin, and I keep doing that like 2 years or something.
I feel
And
like when you
then-
guys did that, you were one of like the first like Spanish language like podcasts. Like there wasn't a lot of Spanish language Bitcoin information. I feel like you were one of the pioneers of that.
Yeah, there wasn't that many, and the ones that were around were more about crypto in general. We were mainly focused on Bitcoin, so that was a really differential factor, and also a good way to connect people from abroad with what was happening in the country, because people were curious about it is really helping. Is the adoption solving something? We even had Peter McCormack coming to Caracas in a moment after the pandemic, obviously, and it was a really good experience. And then I started working with different companies. As I said, I was really opinionated on Twitter. I had some following there, so it's. I was part of the conversation, and that helped me to start a career in different companies. And as I said, it was a really hard start, but right now I think that it's a good moment to build stuff, and I'm lucky enough to be part of teams that are trying to build solutions and that are aligned with Bitcoin as I am.
Nice. Well, that's a very, very inspiring story. And I think that's a perfect way to close out the 100th episode.
Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. And let's go for the next 100 episodes.
Indeed. Well, thanks, Javier. I appreciate you interviewing me for once.